This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to Drive-Thru Review 752. Today we're going to talk about Rear Window. This is from Funko Games, designed by the folks over at Prospero Hall. Now this is a 3 to 5 player game, obviously based on the Alfred Hitchcock classic Rear Window, which I have to say is one of my favorite movies of all time. So, if I have to break this game down, if you've not heard of it already, it is sort of like a Mysterium or Dixit or one of those kind of sort of abstract, surrealist sort of mental puzzle games, but it's definitely its own thing. So I don't really want to spoil the movie here because I do recommend folks try to watch it, it's hard to stream these days. I'm not actually sure where you can stream it. There is a movie on Netflix, I will say, just a quick tangent. I can't remember the name of it. We watched it a couple of months ago. The main star of the movie is Amy Adams, and it's something Rear Window. I don't remember the name of it, but it's very much an homage to not only this movie, but a lot of Hitchcock movies. It's a really good movie. I really like it in its own regard. And so this is kind of the plot of this movie is there's a guy who has an injury. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he's broken his leg. And he's a photographer in general, like a photojournalist. And it's kind of what he sees out the back of his window across the apartments across the street. And so there's a lot of interplay in the movie of if there was a murder, was there a murder? Is the guy too doped up on his painkillers? You know, that kind of thing. Is he imagining things? Is he got cabin fever? You know, that kind of stuff. So the movie really plays around with that. And then the game kind of attempts to sort of simulate that idea. So one player will be acting as the director, kind of presenting the scenes to the other players who are the watchers. So you can see here Jimmy Stewart plays kind of the main protagonist. So the other players are kind of taking on his role or the roles of maybe other people on the apartment across the street. And then the director is kind of throwing scenes out there. In a lot of these other games like this, our cards are very abstract. In this, they're a little bit more grounded in a certain level of realism, but there is some sort of a level of surrealism or abstraction there to them, but not a lot. So it's very sort of concrete scenes. So you'll be playing these cards to sort of guide them as to who is who and who kind of is kind of situated in what kind of role. And I'll explain the mechanics there. And there may be a murder and there may not be. That's going to be kind of randomly determined at the very beginning of the game. And then that's also going to dictate the victory condition. So I'm explaining a lot up front here, but it's good to know this up front before I show you the mechanics. Because if there is no murder in play, the game does not randomly generate a murder, then it ends up being a pure co-op game, but you don't know it's a pure co-op game. The director can't tell you, oh, there's no murder, so we're going to do it this way. Although I have some thoughts about that in the review part. So in that case, it kind of plays out, it's different than Mysterium, but it plays out like Mysterium where it's a co-op and you're trying to sort of coach and guide everybody through these sort of, imagery of the cards to get the right solution. So that's one way. Now, if a murder gets shuffled in, then you're playing in almost a semi-cooperative way, but in very much an adversarial way where one side is going to win, either the director or the watchers. And what happens is you want the watchers to get almost all of the clues right and get everything right except for the murder. If you're the director, that's the way the director wins. They get almost there, but not quite there, and they don't get the murder right. If you're the watchers, you don't have to get everything right, but you got to get most of them right and the murder. So that prevents you from kind of, throwing a grenade on the game and then trying to do really bad, because then in that case, if either side ends up doing that because things aren't going their way or whatever, then both sides lose. Although when we've played it, I will say this is kind of a spoiler for the review, sometimes I think one side might lose more than the other, but effectively both sides lose. It hasn't been a problem in our games, but we've kind of theory crafted a little bit. I'll talk more about that in the review. But let's go down and look at the mechanics. Mechanics are actually very simple, and then I'll kind of come back and tell you about my experiences. Okay, so here is how the table might look set up for the players here. So as the director, you're going to have this shield, which I'm just going to take away. And what you are preventing the players from seeing is kind of the final solution, which will be on this board here. So you will have different people assigned to different roles, and some roles will kind of be dual purpose. I should have grabbed another character here for that. And so this will be acting as kind of a key for this final solution here. So you will see this down here. Let's zoom in a little bit. So the director only will see this, and this will be somewhat randomly determined at the start of the game. And it could be that one of these, instead of having kind of a generic kind of abstract personality role thing, they could be the murderer. But that's going to be determined by taking one of each of these tiles, or a certain number of these, 12 of these actually, shuffling them up and grabbing one of each of them, shuffling them up, and then distributing them here, putting the rest that the director was dealt into this box, which is nice to kind of hide it away. And then the director will assign from one of the 8 different personalities here. And this tray is really cool. This just makes it easy to have all these things out because there's a lot of tokens there. And they'll take one of each of these and then assign these. And the ones they don't use, again, will be put in this box for safekeeping, hidden away. Now, there's a couple of ways to play it, and I would also recommend. So the rules actually recommend not using these because you can see these actually have sort of 2 parts with this. So this one, this gal here, she's the athlete, you know that. Well, this girl here is maybe looking for romance with this couple or one of the people in this couple, or maybe both. And so in this case, you kind of have to guess the whole combination. So this is kind of an advanced mode to add these purple ones, and there's several of these. And the game recommends not using those, and I would say definitely on your first couple games, don't use them. And I would say at most use one of them. I mean, if you want to get super hardcore with it, you could have, you know, multiple uses of that, but I think that gets a little bit too difficult. So that's the key. Now, if we zoom up here, we'll see we have day 1, which I've revealed here, day 2, day 3, day 4, and that's basically 4 turns. Okay, so what's going to happen is over the course of 4 turns, the director will have a hand of 8 of these cards, and these are going to show you various different scenes, right? So here you've got kind of a teddy bear, there's some money hidden under the bed. You've got this person here, which is, you can see this one's in purple, and then this one is gray. Now there is sort of kind of a purple person here. So this is Mr. Thorwald, right? And you can see that kind of goes along with him. So there are cards that will very clearly indicate a person because it'll kind of match the background color and then it'll have them in there. Whereas you have these gray cards that don't necessarily depict a player or a character, but you will have some of them, the gray ones, that will show a portrait of one of the characters that you'll see there. And then there's all kinds of different things. So there's a lot of stuff kind of going on in the cards. Here there's people having dinner, there's a record player, there's a cat drinking some milk, you've got a turkey with kind of an ominous knife in there, some cleaning supplies and some stuff there on a shelf and so on. It's got some booze on a shelf there, some kind of travel packages here, some other things. So what the director's going to do on their turn is they're going to play cards to certain places here. Again, they have 8 cards. There's spots for 8 places for them to go. You can put 2 of them face down. So I could have at most 2 of them face down. Otherwise, I gotta have to deal with what I've been dealt. Now, at any time you want during the game, even when it's not necessarily your turn, you can discard one of these 3 director tokens here, discard those, and then discard as many cards that are in your hand at the time and then draw that many. So you might get a frustrating hand of cards, I mean you will, and then you're going to want to make use of those throughout the course of the game. So once the director has done that, then the players also have a screen, which they may or may not use. It has kind of a map of some of the things on here and all the attributes, so the players can discuss and say, you know, this one and that one without clearly saying, you know, okay, the girl in red with Mr. Thorwald with the dartboard or whatever. If they want to kind of try to hide their conversation because maybe they think there's a murder and the director's not being completely forthcoming, they can use that. So behind that screen or off to the side, they will have the rest of these tokens because remember the director took one of each that was in play, and then they will have all the different characters here, and then they also have the other murder token. And so what they will end up doing is they will start to assign these to this board, maybe discussing, you know, what's what, assigning different people to them. And so once they fill up this board here with the different combinations of people, then the director will tell you, okay, you've got maybe 2 out of 8 right. Because if we zoom out here, you can see there's sort of 8 different ideas. You're trying to get the actual person. So the person will go in these 4 spots. And then you have the different adjectives in those. So there's 4 plus 4, there's 8. And of course, so let's say there's no murder, right? You're trying to play co-op. Then you're trying to get all 8 at the end of any one day. Now, miracle of miracles, you would get it on the first day. I don't think that would ever happen. I'm sure it's probably mathematically possible. I don't know if it's realistically possible. So you'll do that. So you do the first day and say, okay, let's say we got 2, because that's probably even generous for day 1, because day 1 can be rough. And then you're going to go over here and you're going to flip over day 2 and you're going to do the same thing, because the director has drawn 8 new cards while the players are discussing, and they've been looking through their new hand of cards here. And then once the players are done, the director's told you how many you got right. Then you're going to take and play these cards out. Again, discarding any director tokens to draw new cards if you got kind of a crummy hand. And then hopefully you've presented some more, and hopefully this number has gone up. So maybe at the end of day 2, you've got 5 right now. So you're getting pretty close. So you're going to do that for 4 days. Now, the only time that the other players, the watchers, can guess murder is on the 4th day. You can't guess that previous to that. And you probably wouldn't be able to, honestly. So hopefully the number goes up. And like I said, if it's co-op, if there's no murder in play, which the players won't be guaranteed to know, then you're just all trying to kind of work cooperatively and then get all 8 of these correct by the end of the 4th day. I have seen it where the players got it all correct by the end of the day, the 3rd day. But I'll explain how that worked out. There are also 4 over here special abilities that are once per game special abilities that the watchers, the other players, can use. And this will kind of help hone in on some of the different clues that were provided out here on the day board. I'm not going to get into the details of these. The mechanics are very simple. So it helps you kind of fine tune what the director was trying to do. There is one of these where specifically the director can kind of be a little bit disingenuous, let's say, and that's this one here with Lisa Fremont. So this one allows the director to point to a specific part of a card and say this is the important part. So you can kind of be misdirecting. Now this one here is a yes/no on a specific, component, whether it's the person or the attribute. They cannot lie about that. And this other one here is about replacing some other cards that may have been put out there. So these are all powers that the players can use once per game. So we've talked about the co-op victory, which is, both teams will win if we get all 8 of these correct. Now the director will win if the players get 6 or 7 correct, but does not include a correct murder, right? So if they get 7 right, but they didn't get the murder right, or they didn't think there was a murder or something like that, the director wins. The watchers will win if they get 7 or 8 right, and of course they select the murder. So they don't have to get everything, just at least 7, and then they win. Again, the director wins if they get at least 6, but they don't get the murder right. Any other condition, if they get less than 6, any other combination, then both teams will lose. And again, I've not seen it actually be an issue where somebody kind of throws the game in a certain way to make sure everybody loses because they're not going to lose. I think that might happen, but also, come on. You're playing a game about Rear Window, and it's a fun kind of, not too heavy classical kind of game, based on a classic movie. Don't be a jerk. It could come up playing with the wrong person. But that's really just the game. That's it. You just play the cards, use some of these powers, and try to deduce and kind of string along. Really the key here is you're going to start to see a consistency, hopefully, through the days of they reused this same kind of imagery here and here and here. So you can be able to kind of narrow it down. Like I said, day 1, you're hardly going to get anything right. It's just going to be a little bit random luck, a little bit dictated by the cards. But as time goes on over the days, you're going to start to be able to narrow your focus and then get down to the crucial moments of day 3 and 4. Okay, so that was a quick overview of Rear Window. Let me walk through my pillars of review here. Let's see, play time. We'll talk about that. This says 40 minutes. I think that's probably a perfect amount of time. It's going to take you half hour or so. Not too much longer than that. It really won't get up to about an hour. Maybe with your first time rules explanation, that might push an hour. And that's including the game and the rules. But yeah, so 40 minutes seems good. Now, player count. The box says 3 to 5. I've played it with 3 up to 6 actually. And I think that's fine. So you always have one player, that's the director, playing the cards. You need at least 2 other people to play the other side. You could play it with 2. I don't see that would be too much trouble. Maybe I'll talk about this more in a minute, but maybe you might play just pure co-op with 2 players and just leave it at that. And so there you have that. So, but up to 6, it obviously goes over the recommended player count. You could have up to 10 people as watchers. I think honestly that would be too many, because it would just be too much discussion. But I think you can stretch the bounds with that 5. When we played it with 6, it worked fine. I thought it worked great. So I could see you pushing maybe 7, 8, if you really wanted to. With 5, it gives everybody kind of a power that they could probably use, but the powers are collective, so it's not a big deal. So yeah, I think you can play it at any count, really. 2, you can try 2 up to infinity, Now, as far as what is this game like, I've already kind of mentioned that it's kind of like Mysterium and Dixit, where you're playing and your communication is all driven by cards. In this case, the imagery is not really abstract or surrealist or anything like that. It's a little bit more concrete, although it kind of tinges on the surreal, just ever so slightly. The kind of juxtaposition of images is, I'm sure there's some fancy art term for that, but it's kind of a collage-y, mindscape of surrealism. Can you kind of think you're seeing something that maybe you aren't seeing, or you're not picking out a particular detail, which is really a lot of what this movie's about, which is a really great movie, which I recommend everybody go see. But this is a different beast. Now, some of these other games that are like this, are like Mysterium. I've had success with the family and with the gamer group. This one was not a super success with the family. I think it was just a little bit too nuanced. Now, granted, we only gave it a couple of plays, and then it just didn't really, they really just didn't get it. I mean, they got it, but I think it was just a little bit, some of the sort of subtleties in the metagame and stuff were a little bit lost, and I think because of that sort of implied adversarial role, it just made it that much more difficult. I'll get to that in a second. But me having played it, now I've only played it as the director. I've not played it as the watchers. But I think I can speak to that experience. I've talked to my family and my other friends about that experience, so I have a good feeling of that. The subtleties and some of the nuance of how you can kind of meta the thing, I think it requires a couple of plays. So, for example, one of the things you do is you randomly get the attributes, but then you can select the people, the faces that go with those attributes. So you can already kind of start to cook the pot a little bit in that regard and start to make suggestions that way, and be able to more easily steer people down certain paths and things like that. So there's just some subtlety there. There's a consistency with how the cards are put together. Like I showed you, some of the cards are colored with different background colors which directly match the person, and so you can kind of stay away from using those if you can to suggest the attribute when you're trying to suggest the person. So there's some interplay there. There's some real interesting interplay with the powers, and as the director, knowing how the players might use that power, even if you have a murder in play, and how you can try to use that to sort of manipulate them, trick them into thinking one way versus another is another thing. So a lot of these kind of things are pretty subtle, and they're going to require a few plays to get into. And so I don't think this is really, I was a little bit disappointed. I'm not that disappointed in it, because I thought this would be a good family game, but I think it kind of depends on the family. I think, it's not just like an easy call as a casual game. I think there is some subtleties here. So it's like a kind of a gamer's Mysterium, if I had to throw that stupid phrase on it. I think it kind of is, though. I think it's kind of just a little bit kind of a notch up or something in terms of the subtlety. That's all I want to say about that. But that being said, it's really, really cool. Like when this game really hits and fires on all of its cylinders, and the players are second guessing. They might be sure there's a murderer, but they're not. God, it's got to be this one based on some kind of misdirection you did with one of the powers or something. It could be this one. It's got to be one of these two people, and you're going back and forth, and then as a director, you're like, oh God. And then they pick the other one. You're like, yeah, pick that one in your head, but you don't want to get too excited and telegraph that that's the one you want them to pick. And in a way, I mean, that's just amazing to me, because it fits this idea of not just this movie, but like just mystery movies in general, where they, the movies try to effectively, throw in that twist at the end. And that's, the movie making process, that's just got to be a difficult thing to do, because you can't just throw something out of left field and everybody goes, oh, I didn't see that coming. I mean, you have to be able to see it coming a little bit. You know what I mean? You can't just throw it out of left field and be like, haha, surprise, and be like, that doesn't make any sense. It has to make sense when the twist is revealed. And that's kind of what you're doing here, and that's just a really, really cool thing. that is just a really kind of an amazing kind of achievement that this game, and this is the perfect movie to base that kind of idea on, that it really does achieve that. Now I think there's just, I wouldn't call it a barrier, but I think this is something you have to play a few times to kind of develop a little bit of a metagame, not only with your group, but just with, how everybody understands the game and, what's kind of possible with it. And then you can start to play around, you get some actual material that you can play around with, and you can kind of jerk people's chain a little bit just purely through the imagery of the cards. That's just really friggin' cool. That is just a neat experience. But you got to put in a little bit of time. You're going to have to go through it a little bit. Now, it's not a long game, like 30, 40 minutes. So you can get in and play it and all that stuff. So each play has gotten better for me. I played it 4 times. Each play has gotten better and better and better as I kind of understood what the cards are, how the powers can interact, little sort of things that you can throw out to misdirect. And then some of the things are just going to become a little bit clearer. So one of the things that I was really hung up on after my first game was we had an attribute of the athlete. And I looked through all the cards and I'm like, there's nothing in here that says athlete to me. There's a couple of cards with like a baseball and a mitt, like off to the side, real tiny. And then there's a couple of them that have like trophies on a shelf. You're not really sure what the trophies are, but you could use those as an athlete. So that's kind of good in a way because they have to kind of pick out the subtleties, and I like that. But I was like, in that case, ended up being a co-op game, and I was really trying to get them to guess the athlete, and there was just no friggin' way that they would do it because there was just too many other things that other parts of the image were also tied into. So it was very frustrating. But again, after a couple of plays, you kind of see everybody starts to zero in and knows that those things are there. Like you kind of learn what items are on the card. You're like, oh, I didn't even see that there because it's so small, And so there's that part of it. Now, I will say, because of my experience, I would say, in my opinion, and I could be wrong about this, I would say 100% play this as a pure co-op the first time. Take the murder tile out, say there's no murder, we're going to play this co-op. You don't have to second guess me, because I think that's just a little bit extra weight on the whole process than that needs to be there for your first game. I really think this should be in the, the rules don't say this, but I would say you got to do this. So play co-op and just try to do it, and everybody can kind of see and you can discuss and you go, okay, got it, and then we can keep going. And then you can start throwing in the murder, or not on purpose. I mean, you could if you want, but I wouldn't obviously tell anybody because that kind of ruins it. So, but after that, you just say, okay, now there could be a murder in play, and you got to get so many right and the murder. So I would say you really got to do that. And definitely the blue tiles, like I showed you in the walkthrough, the rules even say don't put those in right away. And I would say don't put those in for a couple of games, because if you got like the murder and it kind of swings the difficulty a little bit too much towards the director and being in favor of the director winning in that case. Of course, if there's no murder gets shuffled in, then it's just difficult on everybody. But I would say yes, don't be shy about kind of slowly stepping into the game, because I think it's important for people to understand the metagame with this one especially. So if there's any kind of knock on it, I would say there's a meta here. And in today's sort of climate, I don't know, this is a thing that's posted online, and it's like people play games once and throw them away or whatever. Don't get this game if that's the kind of thing you're going to do. This one's staying in the collection. We'll maybe talk about it at the end of the year, we'll see. But this is one that I'll definitely hang on to at least for a while longer, because I think there's really a lot to explore, and I kind of want to play as a watcher, and not just to play as a watcher. I don't think I'll really get anything new out of it, but I want to give other people the chance to play as the director, because I think that's really fun. I had a great time with it, and I enjoyed seeing people go back and forth and all that stuff. So I really recommend this. Component wise, it's really cool. I think it's pretty cheap. I think it was like 35 or 40 bucks at Target or Amazon. It has this tray and stuff, which makes things really easy to organize, because there is a lot of pieces and they all kind of look the same and probably easy to mix together. So this is nice. There's little spots for that little hidden chest in here. Everything fits in here really good. So it's a great production all around, and I'm glad it was this movie, because this made me make myself try it more. So it's the first game, honestly, I was like, ugh, this is just not doing it. But then I'm like, they picked this movie for a reason. This is not like a popular movie in 2022. This is not, I was like, who pulled this thing out, of the ether and said, let's make a movie about this somewhat obscure Hitchcock movie. And I was, which I love, but so it made me try it again. So I don't think you need to know, last thought, you don't need to know the movie at all. If a lot of that stuff kind of made sense of what I talked about with the whole, projection of images and mystery and all that stuff. If you like that kind of thing, you don't need to know anything about the movie. This will be right up your alley. So I definitely highly recommend this. Again, just small caveat, give it some plays, get everybody kind of into it, and then I think you'll have a great time. Thanks.